Okay, we're all set to go. 10 seconds to get back to green or else.
Ronnie, I got something to show you.
She, I don't know.
Oh, God. Hi.
Oh, gnarly. Where's he go? I'll get back to you.
Our narrative begins with Kaylee, a youthful high school student, and his father, Daniel. They are immersed in the tranquility of a freshwater swamp, engaged in a fishing expedition. Their peaceful day is abruptly shattered by a fatal three-way car accident, resulting in the tragic loss of Daniel. Fast forward a year, we find Kaylee in his Spanish class succumbing to the allure of sleep. His teacher, Senor Gutierrez, jolts him awake by throwing a white body racer at him. The teacher confronts Kaylee, questioning his academic commitment and provocatively invoking the memory of his deceased father. This leads to a heated exchange that lands Kaylee in court with his mother and teacher. The judge, cognizant of Kale's recent loss, sentences him to 3 months of house arrest during the summer holidays, which involves wearing a GPS-tracked ankle bracelet. Back at home, 2 officers fit Kaylee with the bracelet, which has a 100-meter radius surrounding the GPS modem. If Kaylee steps outside of this radius or unplugs the modem, the police will be alerted. As Kale's mother leaves the room to pay the incarceration fee, Kaylee is left alone with one of the officers who reveals that he is related to Kale's Spanish teacher. With nothing better to do, Kaylee starts his 3-month house arrest by binge-watching every episode of Minute Movies and indulging in extra crunchy peanut butter covered in Hershey's chocolate sauce. A week later, his mother comes home and is disgusted at the mess he's been living in. In frustration, she cuts the cable connection and cancels his Roblox subscription, forcing Kaylee to clean up his room. Kaylee spends the next few hours doing laundry, cleaning the house, and consuming Red Bull. However, his efforts don't last long. Later, Kaylee wakes up to the sound of a moving truck and looks out his window to find a new family moving in next door. He watches with interest but is quickly interrupted when the doorbell rings. He opens the door to find a burning paper bag, which he puts out with his foot, only to realize that he has stepped in dog poop. He spots the culprits and chases after them onto the main road, forgetting about his GPS tracker. He looks down and notices that his tracker is flashing red, indicating that he has stepped out of the allowed radius. He sprints back to his house, but he's a second too late. The cops pull up shortly after, and as he lays on the ground handcuffed, he notices Ashley, the girl from the new family next door. For Kaylee, it's love at first sight. Later, he chats with Detective Parker on a phone. She tells him that he's being let off this time, but it better not happen again. Determined to keep that promise, he assesses the GPS's range and plots out a makeshift barrier around the house so he knows where he's allowed to go. Suddenly, he spots Ashley pulling up into her driveway, but because he's shy, he ducks down under the bushes before rushing inside to avoid being seen. Afterwards, he heads upstairs to have a peek at Ashley through the window. A few days later, Ronnie, his best friend, knocks on the door. They haven't seen each other in ages, so Kaylee gives him a warm welcome. As they make their way up the stairs, Kaylee explains what he's been doing the last few days to satisfy his boredom. He hands Ronnie a pair of binoculars and reveals that he's been spying on his neighbors. He shows that one of them, Mr. Pelsh, is engaging in extracurricular activities with his maid while his wife is at the country club. Next up, he leads Ronnie to the living room and shows him his favorite person to spy on, Ashley. Later that day, Kaylee can be seen doing a little reach around. This is the length he has to go through to not trigger that alarm. Suddenly, Ashley appears and offers her help. The pair talk for a moment before her mom calls her away. That evening, while his mom is dozing off, he watches the news channel and discovers a recent kidnapping in the suburbs. Bored, he decides to tune into a late-night broadcast of yoga instead. After she goes to bed, he sees that one of his neighbors, Mr. Turner, arrives home suspiciously late. As the neighbor gets back in his car and leaves, Kaylee notices that it's the same as the kidnapper's car described on the news, a Mustang with a dent on the front bumper. The next day, Kaylee decides to further investigate his suspicious neighbor. He hides behind his fence just within the radius of the GPS modem. Suddenly, his neighbor spots him and approaches the fence. Kaylee is relieved to learn that the neighbor was simply getting confrontational with a rabbit. Later that day, Ronnie is back at Kale's house. They talk about the recent events. Kaylee is pretty sure his neighbor is a kidnapper. Anyway, they decide to look at Ashley going for another swim. Kaylee has a binoculars, and Ronnie, who leans in a little too far, causes the 2 boys to drop to the ground, fearing that she heard the bang. Kaylee peeks out the window again, and he and Ashley make eye contact. Moments later, the doorbell rings, and the 2 boys stumble on their way down the stairs. After they muster up their courage, they open the door, revealing Ashley. A suspicious Ashley makes her way up to Cale's bedroom before grabbing his binoculars. She asks if he has been spying on her. Kaylee denies it, but it's awkward. Fortunately, they clutch by convincing her that they're only spying on Mr. Turner, the potential cold-blooded killer from Texas. They mention his car's description, but when Ashley has a look, she finds that the fender is fine. Later that night, the three teens set themselves up for a stakeout. Ronnie gets a bunch of snooping equipment from his uncle, and they proceed with a night of sussy spying. After a few hours of mindlessly watching on, they finally spot Mr. Turner pulling up, but he has a completely new whip. He opens the door of his car and leads his new friend inside. Suddenly, he pulls out a sharp knife and prepares to hit it from behind. The two teens look on with horror, but before he penetrates, he ends up cutting off the price tag from her new dress instead. Oh, he's a sugar daddy. That's only slightly less worse than a kidnapper. Well, so much for that murder mystery. The group ends up calling it a night, and Kaylee walks Ashley back home, well, as far as he can. The pair share a romantic moment before Kaylee heads back. After returning to his room, he immediately starts spying on Mr. Turner again. This time, upon looking through the camera, he sees the woman running to escape the house. He begins recording the incident, but this dummy leaves the flash on. Filled with fear, he drops to the ground and holds the camera above his head to see what's going on. He can't see anything, so he stands back up and looks through the binoculars. Oh, I'm screwed. Then Cale's phone rings, and he crawls across the floor to pick it up. It's Ronnie. Kaylee frantically explains the situation, but as he's doing so, he looks out and sees the girl getting back into her car and driving off. I'm sure this is normal, Kaylee. Every guy has a story about that one girl who got away. The next morning, as he's making breakfast, Kaylee grabs his knife and questions his neighbor. What are you doing in my house? But then Cale's mother enters the room holding grocery bags and explaining that she ran into Mr. Turner, aka Robert, at the store on her way out. He offered to change her flat tire, if you know what I mean. No, just kidding, he actually helped her with that. Anyway, his mom remembers that she left the milk in her car, so she heads back to get it, leaving Robert and Kaylee alone in the kitchen. Things get tense as Robert notices Cale's GPS tracker and questions what he did. After Kaylee reveals that he binked his teacher, Robert empathizes, citing his time in high school. There are plenty teachers, I wanted to just go. Way to be subtle. A few moments later, Cale's mom returns with the milk, unlike my dad. Then Robert makes an offer. Want to go out to dinner sometime? No. Later that evening, Ashley hosts a party at her house while her parents are away. Naturally, Kaylee gets back to his spying ways. After a few minutes of peeping, he spots another boy hugging and flirting with Ashley. Oh no. In retaliation, Kaylee decides to blast loud music from his rooftop to disrupt the party, though Ashley ends up jumping through his window to unplug the music. She even threatens to throw away his iPod, but then he admits to having been spying on her since she moved in. He tells her about all the small details of her personality that he's noticed, and somehow Ashley's totally into this, and they kiss. It's either the creepiest or the sweetest thing I've ever heard. Remember, boys, sweet if you're cute, creepy if you're not. Unbeknownst to them, and right next door, Robert's window has just been covered in blood. A few moments later, they hear loud thoughts from outside their window. They look out and see the notorious neighbor dragging a bloody bag down his stairs. The next day, they decide to investigate. Ronnie is tasked with breaking into his car to see what was in the bag. Meanwhile, Ashley follows Robert as he shops, so they know when he's on his way home. Ronnie manages to break into the car when Cale's phone rings, shattering the silence. It's Ashley who is supposed to be keeping an eye on Robert, their suspicious neighbor. Kaylee, suspecting that Robert might be returning home, quickly instructs Ronnie to feed him the password to the garage. As Ashley drives out of the parking lot, she unexpectedly encounters Robert, who confronts her about her recent suspicious behavior. He warns her to stop following him, expressing his frustration with the relentless curiosity of the younger generation. Back at Cale's house, the trio of teenagers convenes to discuss their next steps. Ashley, feeling overwhelmed by the escalating situation, urges them to abandon their investigation. She believes they've crossed the line. However, before they can delve deeper into the conversation, Ashley is called away by her mother. It's her parents' anniversary, and she needs to be present for the celebration. Later that night, Kaylee, undeterred by Ashley's concerns, continues his investigation. He manages to find the blueprints for Robert's house and begins to analyze them meticulously. He even develops a portable camera system that streams live footage to his television. As he's wrapping up his work, Ronnie drops a bombshell. He's left his phone in Robert's car. Kaylee agrees to help Ronnie retrieve his phone, but first he needs Ronnie to break into Robert's garage with the camera. In the garage, Ronnie finds his phone, but Kaylee is more interested in a mysterious bag. Ronnie, upon finding the bag, exclaims about its horrible smell and the presence of hair. Suddenly, the garage door begins to close. Panicked, Ronnie runs into the house. In an effort to save his friend, Kaylee arms himself with a bat and rushes over to Robert's house. Meanwhile, his ankle bracelet, a constant reminder of his house arrest, sends out an alert. Kaylee pleads with the police to check Robert's garage, insisting that his friend is in danger and that there's a body in the house. The police, skeptical of Kaylee's claims, reluctantly agree to inspect the garage. Upon inspecting the blue bag, they find a dead deer that Robert had hit with his car. Back at home, Kaylee is scolded by his mother, who reminds him that he has a court hearing the next day. After she leaves to apologize to Robert, Kaylee watches from his window. Suddenly, he receives a text message from Ronnie, instructing him to check his television. Kaylee turns around and sees Ronnie lying unconscious on the screen. Just as Kaylee realizes the gravity of the situation, his mother is attacked by Robert. Robert then makes his way to Kaylee's house and violently confronts Ronnie. He then goes upstairs to attack Kaylee, but his reflection betrays him, allowing Kaylee to dodge his attack. Kaylee tries to unplug the GPS modem, but Robert prevents him. Kaylee decides to run outside in an effort to trigger the alarm once again, but Robert overpowers him, knocking him out and tying him up. When Kaylee wakes up, Robert threatens to pin all his crimes on him. He forces Kaylee to write down an admission of guilt. But before he can finish, Ashley breaks into the house, giving Kaylee one last chance to attack Robert. Ashley joins in, and together they manage to barricade themselves in a room. Ashley proceeds to free Kaylee while he explains that his mother is at Robert's house. He plans to make his way across the GPS radius, but he's interrupted by Robert. Before he can snatch them up, the two teenagers jump out of the bedroom window and into Ashley's pool, triggering the alarm on his ankle bracelet. Kaylee then dashes towards Robert's house, breaking down the front door. Meanwhile, the police officer is called to Kaylee's house, but he decides to finish his dinner before heading over. Back at Robert's house, Kaylee frantically searches for his mother before uncovering a hidden crawl space under the house. He breaks open the vent and makes his way inside, only to realize he's too big to fit. He hears a noise coming from somewhere else in the house and continues his search. He accidentally opens a hidden room where he discovers an operating table and multiple massive freezers. He spots the ID of a kidnapped girl along with a red wig. He pushes aside a cupboard, revealing another hidden room. At that moment, the police officer arrives and hears noises from within Robert's house. He enters to investigate, only to be attacked and killed by Robert. Back to Kaylee, he falls through the ground of the hidden room and into a pit of muddy water. He finds himself in close proximity to all of Robert's previous victims. Terrified, he makes his way out and finds his mother, who has also been tied up. Before he can cut her free, Robert quickly has Kaylee at death's door. But his mother's protective instincts kick in, and she manages to wound Robert. Having now gained the upper hand, Kaylee attacks Robert and throws him down the hole. Soon after, more police arrive as Kaylee and his mother exit the house safely. A few days later, we see Kaylee getting his ankle bracelet removed by the detective. He's the first one to ever get one of these things taken off early for good behavior. Now a free man, Kaylee spends the rest of his summer holidays with Ashley, enjoying every moment.